The Helios Experiment 1.0. Professor Sandra Mills slammed the phone receiver down with a sharp crack. Her knuckles were white where she'd gripped it too tightly. The office air tasted stale, recycled one too many times through the facility's vents. She didn't smile. Victories were just stepping stones. "Yes, Mr. Johnson," she'd said moments ago, her voice clipped and precise. "We've won the case. Green light confirmed. Thank you for your support." The line had gone dead before the corporate sponsor could offer empty pleasantries. Sandra preferred it that way. Words wasted breath. She pushed back from her steel desk, the chair legs scraping against the concrete floor. Her reflection in the darkened computer monitor showed a woman carved from ice, sharp cheekbones, eyes that missed nothing, hair pulled back ruthlessly. Confidence radiated off her like heat. Months of legal battles, whispered accusations of recklessness, the near constant threat of injunction, all swept aside. Tomorrow, at 0500, they would make history or tear a hole in it. She strode out of her office, the heavy door hissing shut behind her. Her voice cut through the low hum of the control room like a scalpel. "Button! Tina! Frank! Conference room! Now!" She didn't wait for acknowledgement, already moving down the sterile corridor towards the briefing room. Junior Lab Assistant Maloney scrambled out of her path. A stack of sensor calibration reports clutched to her chest. Sandra didn't spare her a glance. Focus was paramount. Every variable needed locking down. Every contingency mapped. Failure wasn't an outcome, it was an unacceptable flaw in preparation. 2 hours later, the cramped conference room buzzed with the low murmur of journalists and a handful of nervous facility staff. Camera flashes popped like distant lightning as Sandra took her place at the podium, the harsh overhead lights bleaching the color from her tailored lab coat. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice amplified and utterly devoid of warmth. "Project Helios commences at 0500 tomorrow. We stand on the precipice of unlocking energy densities previously confined to theoretical models. Our particle accelerator will fracture unique isotopes, revealing pathways to near-limitless clean power generation." She outlined the predicted cascade of subatomic events, the potential for revolutionary battery technology, the projected economic boom, a future painted in stark, confident strokes. "Our simulations are flawless, our containment protocols absolute." A hand shot up from the back row. Lewis Carter, a veteran science correspondent known for his dogged skepticism, leaned into his microphone. "Professor Mills," he called, his voice cutting through the polished presentation. "Respected physicists at CERN and Fermilab have expressed grave concerns about the stability thresholds in your design. They cite the potential for catastrophic resonance failure, even a localized space-time rupture. What safeguards exist against such unforeseen consequences?" A palpable tension tightened the air. Tina shifted uncomfortably in her seat beside Michael, who kept his gaze fixed neutrally on the table. Sandra didn't flinch. A cold, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Mr. Carter," she began, her amplified voice smooth as polished steel. "Our simulations are exhaustive. Our containment fields are triple redundant, calibrated to withstand energy densities orders of magnitude beyond our target output." She paused, letting the technical jargon settle. "There is nothing to worry about. Every parameter is locked down. Every outcome is predicted. The data," she emphasized, leaning slightly towards the microphone, "leaves no room for doubt. It's fully in control. Everything has been worked out in every single detail. Her tone was dismissive, final. She straightened, scanning the room with icy composure. Frankly, she added, her voice dropping into a dry, almost conversational register that cut through the lingering tension. The only problem we might face tomorrow is if someone farts in the control room. The unexpected crudeness, delivered with utter nonchalance, hit the room like a shockwave. Nervous chuckles erupted, swelling into genuine laughter. Reporters grinned, exchanging glances. The tension dissolved into a wave of relieved amusement. Only Lewis Carter remained stone-faced, his pen hovering over his notepad. He didn't smile. He watched Sandra, his eyes narrowed slightly, as if searching for a crack in the polished facade. The dismissal of profound theoretical dangers with a juvenile joke felt less like confidence and more like dangerous hubris. He scribbled a single word: hubris. The laughter faded as Sandra concluded briskly, ignoring Carter's lingering stare. The room emptied, the buzz replaced by the sterile hum of the facility settling into its pre-experiment rhythm. Preparations intensified. Through the night, the accelerator's massive electromagnets cooled to superconducting temperatures, a low, pervasive thrum vibrating through the concrete bones of the mountain. Control panels glowed, displaying streams of complex data. By 3 o'clock, the main control room was a tense hive of focused activity. Michael Baton hunched over a console, his face illuminated by the blue light of multiple screens displaying cascading calculations. Tina monitored the cryogenic systems, while Frank checked the final power couplings. Maloney nervously cross-referenced sensor logs. The air crackled with anticipation, thick with the scent of ozone and stale coffee. Michael traced a fluctuating graph line with his finger, brow furrowed. Tina, confirm the primary reactor output against simulation baseline. Tina's fingers flew across her keyboard. Running diagnostics, sir? Her voice tightened. Reactor 3 is showing a consistent 8.7% energy deficit. It's dipping below the minimum stability threshold. She pointed to a jagged red line on her monitor, stark against the predicted smooth curve. It's not stabilizing. If it drops further during the cascade initiation... Michael leaned in, his calm demeanor cracking. What? How is this possible? These readings are all over the place. He jabbed a finger at the erratic data stream. Recalibrate the sensors. Run the diagnostics again. Now! His voice held an edge rarely heard, cutting through the low hum of machinery and hushed conversations. Frank scrambled to reroute auxiliary power, sweat beading on his forehead. The heavy blast door hissed open. Sandra strode into the control room, her lab coat immaculate, eyes scanning the chaos with icy precision. Baton, report. Her tone brooked no delay. Michael rushed to her side, tablet in hand, the jagged energy graph glaring red. Sandra, listen. Reactor 3's output is fluctuating wildly. It's dipping below critical stability if we initiate the cascade like this. He trailed off, the unspoken danger hanging thick in the air. We need to halt and restart the reactor, or abandon the run. Sandra's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing to slits. Abandon? The word cracked like a whip. Are you out of your mind? Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper, yet it carried to every corner of the tense room. Do you comprehend what's at stake? The sponsor's investment? My career? The future? She stepped closer, her breath cold against his cheek. Your sensor glitches are not my emergency. Fix it, now, without delay. Michael flinched. the jagged red graph trembling in her grip. Sandra, listen. The resonance cascade could amplify that instability. Containment could breach. We're talking about theoretical noise, she hissed, cutting him off. I saw the diagnostics yesterday. Perfect. Flawless. This is panic, not data. She swept a hand toward the humming accelerator chamber visible through the reinforced viewport. We proceed. On schedule. Or I'll find someone who understands consequences beyond cold feet. The next 40 minutes crawled. Engineers Frank and Tina worked frantically, rerouting power feeds, bypassing sensor clusters Sandra deemed faulty. Miloni's hands shook as she cross-referenced conflicting diagnostics. The Reactor 3 output still danced erratically, 8.2%, 8.5%, dipping to 7.9%, a sickening pulse against the required 9.0% baseline. Sweat plastered Frank's shirt to his back. "It's not stabilizing, Professor Batten," he muttered, voice thick with dread. "The harmonics are all wrong." Michael watched the numbers, his knuckles white on the console edge. Sandra stood statue still near the main viewport, arms crossed, eyes fixed not on the screens, but on the massive accelerator ring itself. Her reflection in the thick glass showed no doubt, only impatience. The air tasted metallic, charged. 4:50, 10 minutes to ignition. The reactor engineers' voices rose in clipped, urgent bursts over the comms. "Primary feed unstable. Injector pressure dropping. We're losing buffer integrity." Michael spun towards Sandra. "It's not holding, Sandra. We must abort. The cascade initiation will rip that reactor apart." Sandra didn't turn. "Continue the countdown," she commanded, her voice flat, final. "Override the safety interlocks if you have to. We fire on schedule." A collective intake of breath hissed through the control room. Meloni whimpered softly. Michael looked sick. 04:59. The automated voice filled the chamber, cold and precise. Countdown sequence initiated. 10 seconds. Frank slammed his fist against a console. "Containment harmonics collapsing," Tina screamed. "Secondary couplings failing." 9. Sandra stared fixedly at the accelerator ring through the viewport, her knuckles white on the railing. 8. Michael grabbed her arm. "Sandra, for God's sake!" She shook him off violently. 7. 6. The floor bucked like a living thing. A deafening metallic shriek tore through the facility, followed by tremors that threw Meloni against a console. Sandra staggered, catching herself on a shuddering desk as emergency lights pulsed crimson. 5. Michael bellowed over the groaning metal. "Reactor 7's gone dark. We're below minimum power. Abort." 4. Sandra's head snapped towards the main display. Where Reactor 7's status had been a weak, flickering amber, it was now a flat, dead black. The jagged line from Reactor 3 plunged deeper into the red. Her face, moments ago carved from ice, was slack. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected the frantic dance of warning lights on the screens. That ironclad certainty, the bedrock of her ambition, dissolved in an instant, leaving only hollow shock. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. 3. The automated voice was a hammer blow. Metal screamed again, deeper this time, a sound felt in the bones. The floor heaved violently. Consoles sparked. Meloni screamed as a shower of sparks erupted overhead. Frank slammed emergency shutdown protocols, his fingers a blur. "Override failing! Cascade sequence locked," he yelled, voice cracking. Tina frantically rerouted power, her monitor flashing catastrophic failure symbols. It's feeding back. Containment field destabilizing. 2. Sandra remained frozen, rooted to the shuddering floor near the viewport. The dead black void where Reactor 7 should be pulsed on the screen. A phantom flicker. Her knuckles were bone white on the desk edge. Michael grabbed her shoulder, shaking her. Sandra! Abort code, now! Her head turned slowly, eyes wide, vacant pools reflecting the strobing crimson alarms. Her lips moved soundlessly. The bedrock of her certainty wasn't just cracked, it was pulverized dust. 1. The final syllable hung in the air, thick with ozone and dread. Then the world tore itself apart. Not just a tremor, a titanic heave. The reinforced concrete floor buckled upwards, throwing Sandra sideways. She crashed hard against the viewport glass, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. Metal screamed like dying beasts as structural beams groaned overhead. A section of ceiling panels rained down, shattering near Maloney, who curled into a ball, shrieking. Frank was thrown clear across his console, landing in a heap. Tina clung to a station, fingers bleeding as sparks showered around her. Michael staggered, bracing against a console as it sparked violently. "Containment breach!" he roared, his voice barely audible over the rending metal and shrieking alarms. "Field integrity at 12%. It's hemorrhaging." 0. The word vanished beneath a roar that wasn't sound, but pure force. Light, blinding, searing white, erupted from the accelerator chamber beyond the viewport, consuming everything. Then came the push. An invisible fist slammed into the control room. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks and molten plastic. The reinforced viewport didn't shatter. It bulged inward with a tortured groan, spiderwebbing instantly into a million fractures before the blast wave hit the inner wall. Sandra was hurled backward like a rag doll, crashing into Michael, both tumbling in a tangle of limbs amidst flying debris. Maloney's scream was swallowed by the deafening chaos. Frank vanished behind a collapsing bank of monitors. Tina was thrown against the shuddering blast door, crumpling silently. Then, silence. Not the soft quiet of a paused moment, but a thick, suffocating absence. The roar vanished as if severed by a blade. Dust motes danced in the beams of emergency lights that flickered weakly, casting long, grotesque shadows across the ruined control room. The air tasted of burnt wiring, ozone, and something metallic. Blood, maybe. Debris littered the floor, shattered glass from the viewport, sparking console fragments, crumpled calibration reports. Surprisingly, the main structure held. No gaping holes, no collapsed ceiling beams. Just wreckage strewn across the scarred floor. Michael groaned, pushing himself up from where he'd. His flashlight beam cut through the swirling dust, illuminating Tina slumped against the shuttered blast door, unconscious but breathing raggedly. Frank groaned nearby, half buried under a collapsed monitor bank. Maloney whimpered softly, curled into a ball near sparking wires. Sandra lay sprawled a few feet away, unmoving, a trickle of blood darkening her temple. Michael scrambled towards her, flashlight beam trembling. "Sandra!" His voice was hoarse, swallowed by the oppressive silence. "Status!" he barked, turning his light towards the dead consoles. Every screen was dark, no hum of servers, no blinking status lights, utter blackness. Power's gone. Total grid failure. He grabbed the landline phone, dead air. He fumbled for his mobile, no signal bars, nothing. Frank, Tina, anyone comms check. His shout echoed uselessly. Frank crawled free, coughing. Internal comms are fried, external line, dead. He shone his light towards the accelerator chamber viewport. The reinforced glass was a spider-webbed ruin, miraculously holding, but beyond only darkness. Miloni stumbled to her feet, flashlight beam shaking wildly. The breach, the field, did it hold? Her voice was a terrified whisper. He strode to the primary console, jamming buttons frantically. No response. Backup generators? Tina groaned, stirring. Should have kicked in, instantly. She pointed a trembling beam at the silent generator status panel, utterly dark. They're offline too. The silence pressed heavier. Complete isolation. Michael grabbed Sandra's shoulders. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Sandra. She blinked, confusion replacing shock. What? Her gaze swept the wreckage. Spilled coffee, sparking wires, dust settling. What the hell happened? Her voice cracked, stripped of its usual ice. Michael met her gaze. Our power levels were critically low. 3 reactors malfunctioned during initiation. He paused, the next words heavy. I don't know if we had a radiation breach. If we did. He didn't finish. The implication hung thick. Sandra froze. The panic was naked now, the sal jar on the crate. Oh my God. The whisper was pure terror. Her bossy image melted away. Radiation? We could be. She scrambled back, pressing against the cold wall, eyes darting wildly. The others froze, the word radiation echoing in the suffocating silence. Miloni whimpered, pulling her lab coat tighter. Frank hauled Tina upright. Radiation sensors are dead, he yelled, slamming a fist against a dark panel. No readings. We need to move. Michael nodded sharply. Stairs. Now. Upper levels. He grabbed Sandra's arm. She flinched but stumbled forward, her legs unsteady. Tina limped, leaning on Frank. Miloni scrambled after them, flashlight beam jerking across the debris-strewn corridor. The emergency lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. The air tasted of scorched metal and concrete dust. Behind them, the ruined viewport seemed to pulse with unseen menace. Frank kicked open the heavy stairwell door. It groaned on bent hinges. Darkness swallowed them as they climbed, flashlights cutting narrow tunnels of light. The only sounds were ragged breaths and boots scraping concrete. Sandra clutched Michael's sleeve, her fingers trembling. The sponsors. Johnson. She stammered, incoherent. Michael didn't reply. Survival first. Hours crawled. Level after level yielded only silence and wreckage. Offices lay ransacked, chairs overturned, terminals smashed. Labs were tombs filled with shattered glassware and spilled chemicals. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just emptiness. Miloni whimpered at every dark doorway. Tina sank onto an overturned crate in a deserted break room, clutching her bleeding hand. Frank swept his flashlight across the ceiling vents. No comms chatter, no alarms, nothing. Sandra paced, her panic hardening into brittle confusion. Where are they? She hissed, stopping abruptly. Where did all the people go? Michael leaned against a wall, exhaustion etching his face. Maybe they evacuated. Fast. He looked at Frank. Any idea? Secondary exits? Panic protocols? Frank shook his head grimly. Protocols would have locked us down together. This feels wrong. Michael pushed off the wall. We rest here. 10 minutes. He gestured toward a dented water cooler miraculously intact. Drink. Then we push to Sector Command. If any systems are live, they'll be there. Sandra stared at the cooler, her reflection distorted in its scratched metal surface, a ghost of her former certainty. She didn't move. Tina sipped water, wincing. Miloni curled up on the floor, hugging her knees. Frank checked Tina's makeshift bandage. The silence pressed in, thicker than the dust. 10 minutes stretched into 20. No one protested. Finally, Michael clicked his flashlight back on. West corridor. Commands that way. They moved like sleepwalkers. Flashlight beams cut through the gloom, revealing buckled doors and shattered ceiling panels. Footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. Sandra walked beside Michael, her breath shallow. Johnson will have sent rescue teams, she muttered, more to herself than anyone. He invested too much. Her voice trailed off as Frank's beam caught something dark and wet smeared across the floor tiles. Miloni gagged. Tina looked away. Michael quickened his pace. They passed silent labs, a ruined cafeteria, an infirmary with cabinets ripped open. Nothing moved except dust motes dancing in their lights. The oppressive silence pressed down. An hour crawled by. Miloni sniffled. No one? Anywhere? Frank scanned a junction, his beam trembling slightly, like they vanished into thin. Tina's scream ripped through the stillness, sharp, terrified. Oh my God! What is that? In front of us! Her flashlight beam jerked wildly, illuminating the far end of the corridor. Something massive crouched there, blocking their path. Not a rat, something wrong. Twice the size of a large dog, its fur was patchy, matted with dark filth, revealing raw, glistening skin beneath. Its limbs were grotesquely elongated, ending in claws that scraped concrete, but the eyes, twin points of malevolent, pulsing red light, fixed unblinkingly on the group. A low, guttural growl vibrated the air, thick with the stench of decay and ozone. Frank didn't hesitate. Run! He shoved Miloni backward, his own beam sweeping the horror as it unfolded itself. The creature moved. Not a scamper, a lunge. Unnaturally fast, a blur of distorted limbs and those burning eyes. Michael grabbed Sandra's arm, hauling her around. Back! Now! They sprinted, boots pounding on debris-strewn tiles. Flashlight beams bounced crazily, casting frantic shadows. Behind them, the scrape of claws grew louder, impossibly fast, accompanied by wet, ragged breathing. Tina stumbled, crying out as Frank yanked her upright. Miloni sobbed, running blind. Sandra gasped, her icy composure shattered, pure terror driving her legs. The corridor blurred, doors flashed past, locked, buckled, useless. The creature's stench, rot and hot metal, filled the air, thick enough to choke on. Its guttural snarl vibrated in their bones. Michael spotted a heavy maintenance door, slightly ajar on the left. Here! He slammed his shoulder against it, Frank adding his weight. It groaned open just as the red eyes flared behind them, illuminating the creature's gaping maw, lined with jagged, metallic-looking teeth. They tumbled through, Frank dragging Tina, Michael pulling Sandra and Miloni. Frank slammed the door shut, throwing his full weight against it. Something heavy thudded against the metal, denting it inward with a screech of tortured steel. Claws scrabbled furiously at the seam. Tina! Michael roared over the din, pointing at a heavy metal workbench nearby, overturned amidst scattered tools. That table! Block the door. Tina scrambled, tears streaking through the grime on her face. She grabbed one end, Frank abandoning the door for a split second to seize the other. Sandra and Miloni added their frantic strength. Together, they heaved the massive bench sideways, ramming it against the shuddering door. The impact shook the room. Dust rained from the ceiling. The creature slammed against the barrier again, a furious, guttural shriek echoing through the metal. The bench held, wedged tight. The pounding intensified, rhythmic, savage, but the door held, bulging inward with each blow but not buckling. Minutes stretched, each thud a hammer blow to their nerves. Miloni covered her ears, whimpering. Sandra pressed her back against the far wall, eyes wide and unblinking, her breath ragged gasps. Then, abruptly, silence. Only the frantic panting of the survivors filled the small, dark storage room. Frank slumped against the bench, sweat pouring down his face. What in the holy hell was that? His voice trembled, barely a whisper. Michael slowly lowered his shoulder from the door, his own eyes wide with primal fear. I have no clue, he breathed, staring at the dented metal. It was huge. Those eyes. That smell. Tina choked back a sob, hugging herself. I want to get out of here. I want to go home. What was it? Frank shushed her urgently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Quiet, Tina. Quiet. It might still be out there, listening. Michael pressed his ear flat against the cold, scarred metal of the door. Absolute silence from the corridor beyond. He held up a hand, signaling for utter stillness. 5 agonizing seconds passed. 10. Nothing. Michael straightened slowly, his flashlight beam cutting through the dusty gloom of the storage room. Okay, he whispered, his voice taut as wire. We move. Now. Quiet as ghosts. He gestured toward the door opposite the barricaded entrance, a smaller, unmarked maintenance hatch. Frank nodded grimly, pulling Tina close. Miloni clung to Sandra, who stood rigid, her face pale, staring blankly at the dented door, as if expecting it to explode inward. Michael eased the hatch open, its hinges groaning softly. He peered out, flashlight sweeping the new corridor. Empty, debris-strewn, dark. Clear, he breathed. Stay close. Step where I step. They filed out, single file, into the oppressive silence. The air hung thick with dust and the lingering metallic tang of ozone. Their footsteps, muffled by scattered papers and chunks of ceiling tile, sounded impossibly loud. Flashlight beams danced nervously, illuminating buckled walls, shattered light fixtures, and dark stains on the floor that Tina refused to look at. Michael led, scanning every shadowed doorway, every ventilation grate. Sandra followed, her breathing shallow and rapid, her usual icy command replaced by a brittle, wide-eyed vigilance. Frank kept Tina close behind him, his arm protectively around her shoulders. Miloni brought up the rear, her light trembling wildly, constantly glancing back. A sharp scrape echoed behind them, like metal dragging on concrete. They froze instantly, hearts hammering against ribs. Flashlights snapped around, beams converging on the source. A pile of collapsed ceiling tiles near a darkened lab entrance. Nothing moved. The debris lay undisturbed. Silence pressed down again, heavier than before. Just settling, Frank whispered hoarsely, though his knuckles were white on his flashlight. Miloni whimpered, her light sweeping frantically across the pile. Sandra, her nerves frayed to breaking point, instinctively looked up, scanning the jagged ceiling above Frank. Her flashlight beam caught it, suspended in the gloom directly over Frank's head, clinging to a twisted ventilation duct like some grotesque chandelier. A spider, but impossibly huge, the size of a large dog, its carapace a glossy, oily black that drank the light. 8 multi-jointed legs curled inward, poised. Two bulbous crimson eyes glowed with predatory stillness, fixed on Frank's oblivious form below. Sandra's breath hitched in her throat, a strangled gasp escaping. Frank. She choked out, pointing upwards, terror locking her limbs. Frank started to turn, confusion replacing vigilance. What? The word died as the spider dropped. It fell with unnatural silence, a nightmare descending. Its legs splayed wide mid-air, revealing a pale, segmented underbelly. Before Frank could flinch, before Tina could scream, the creature landed squarely on his shoulders with a sickening thump. Its foremost limbs, tipped with barbed hooks like scythes, snapped forward with horrifying speed. There was a wet, crunching pop, like a melon splitting. Frank's head vanished beneath the creature's horrifying embrace. His flashlight clattered to the floor, beams spinning wildly, illuminating Tina's frozen, open-mouthed horror and the dark arterial spray painting the wall behind her. The spider's mandibles worked furiously, a wet, tearing sound filling the corridor as it devoured its prize. Frank's decapitated body slumped bonelessly to the ground, Sandra's paralysis shattered into pure, shrieking terror. No! No! Her scream ripped through the silence, raw and primal. She didn't think, she lunged, her hand clamped like a vice around Meloni's thin wrist, yanking the stunned assistant backward with brutal force. Meloni stumbled, a choked sob escaping her as Sandra hauled her away from the grisly feast. They didn't look back. They didn't choose a direction. They simply ran, boots skidding on debris, flashlight beams jerking wildly into the suffocating darkness ahead. Sandra's breath came in ragged, panicked gasps, her mind blank except for the image of Frank's vanishing head and the pulsing red eyes of the thing that had stalked them earlier. Behind them, Tina's delayed, piercing scream echoed, abruptly cut short by a wet gurgle and a renewed tearing sound. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs threatened to buckle. Sandra slammed shoulder first into a heavy metal door marked Storage B7. Fumbling desperately with the latch, it groaned open. They stumbled inside, collapsing onto the cold concrete floor amid scattered crates and discarded packing foam. The door swung shut behind them with a heavy thud, plunging them into near darkness except for the weak, trembling beams of their flashlights. Meloni curled into a fetal position, her body racked with silent, shuddering sobs. Sandra pressed her back against a crate, gulping air, staring blankly at the dancing dust motes in her light beam. Frank was gone. Tina was gone. The creature, the spider, radiation, the weight crashed down. The isolation, the horror, the utter ruin of her project, her ambition, her certainty. Meloni's voice shattered the oppressive quiet, high-pitched and raw with panic. What now? She gasped between sobs, lifting her tear-streaked face towards Sandra. What are we going to do? Her flashlight beam jerked erratically across the ceiling. They're dead! Frank, Tina, oh God, the pleas hung in the air. Desperate and accusing. Sandra didn't look at her. She stared straight ahead into the gloom, her knuckles white where they gripped her flashlight. Meloni's words echoed her own spiraling thoughts. What now? The weight crushed her. The project she had pushed through. The safety protocols she dismissed. The lives she was responsible for. Frank's head vanishing beneath that chitinous horror replayed behind her eyes. Tina's scream cut short, her throat tightened, air refusing to fill her lungs. Answers? There were none. No protocols covered mutated abominations hunting survivors in a tomb. No training prepared her for this crushing isolation, the silence screaming louder than alarms. Elevators dead. Comms silent. Rescue a cruel joke. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone with the consequences. Maloney's choked sobs intensified, a frantic counterpoint to Sandra's suffocating silence. "Professor Mills! Please! We have to do something!" The assistant scrambled closer on her knees, desperation etching lines into her grimy face. "They're out there. Those things. We can't stay here." Her flashlight beam jerked wildly across the storage room's shadowed corners, illuminating dusty crates and coiled cables like lurking threats. Sandra flinched as the light brushed her face. Maloney's panic was infectious, a buzzing hornet's nest threatening to overwhelm her own fragile control. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to summon the icy command that had defined her, the ruthless certainty that propelled Project Helios. It was gone, shattered, replaced by a hollow, echoing terror. Hours bled into the oppressive stillness. The air grew thick and stale, tasting of dust and despair. Maloney's sobs subsided into exhausted hiccups, then into a fragile, uneasy silence punctuated only by her ragged breathing. She curled tighter against a stack of plastic-wrapped pallets, her flashlight dimming beside her. Sandra remained slumped against her crate, trapped in a waking nightmare replaying Frank's death. Tina's scream, the pulsing red eyes in the corridor. Exhaustion pulled at her eyelids, a dangerous lure promising oblivion from the horror. She drifted, her head lolling against the rough wood, the line between consciousness and nightmare blurring. A sound pierced the silence, distant, metallic, a rhythmic scrape, 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 like something heavy being dragged across concrete. Maloney's eyes snapped open. She held her breath, straining to hear. It came again, echoing faintly down the ventilation shafts, or perhaps from a corridor far above. Closer this time? Her heart hammered against her ribs. She scrambled onto her knees, crawling frantically towards Sandra's slumped form. "Sandra," she hissed, voice trembling. "Sandra!" She shook the professor's shoulder roughly. Sandra groaned, stirring sluggishly, her eyes unfocused beneath bruised lids. "Sandra, please wake up," Maloney pleaded, desperation sharpening her whisper. "I heard something out there." The scraping stopped abruptly. Utter silence crashed back down, heavier than before. Maloney froze, her hand still gripping Sandra's lab coat. Sandra blinked, awareness flooding back with the jolt. The dark room, the terror, Maloney's frantic eyes, inches from her own. Before Maloney could whisper again, the heavy door handle rattled violently. Both women flinched, scrambling backward like startled animals, pressing themselves against the crates. Maloney stifled a shriek. Sandra's hand flew to her mouth, her breath trapped in her chest. The rattling ceased, a pause, then a muffled thump against the door, followed by a low, urgent whisper cutting through the metal. "Sandra! Maloney, are you in there? It's Michael!" The whisper sliced through the metal door, hoarse but unmistakable. Sandra lunged forward, scrambling over scattered debris. Her fingers fumbled with the heavy latch, cold metal biting into her skin. The door groaned open a crack, revealing Michael's haggard face streaked with grime and dried blood. Tina stood behind him, swaying slightly, her eyes wide and vacant. Both clutched lengths of jagged steel pipe, dark stains coating their makeshift weapons. Behind them, the corridor lay empty but reeked of ozone and something coppery. Are you both okay? Tina rasped, her voice raw. Her gaze flickered past Sandra, searching the gloom for Maloney. Michael didn't wait. He shoved his pipe into the gap, forcing the door wider, his eyes scanning the corridor shadows like a hunted animal. "We have to hurry," he hissed, urgency cracking his voice. "Those things move in packs." "They'll be back." He grabbed Tina's elbow, pulling her inside. Tina stumbled, her vacant eyes briefly focusing on Maloney's tear-streaked face before drifting away. The stench clinging to them, ozone mixed with fresh, metallic blood, filled the cramped storage room. Hours became a blur of terror-fueled silence. They moved like ghosts through the corpse of the facility, guided only by Michael's fractured memory of service tunnels. Twice, guttural shrieks echoed through ventilation shafts, freezing them mid-step. Once, wet scraping sounds pursued them down a stairwell, fading only when they barricaded a fire door with a fallen server rack. Maloney stopped crying, her terror hardening into numb shock. Sandra moved mechanically, her mind replaying Frank's death on a loop. Tina remained silent, clutching her pipe like a lifeline. Michael led, his knuckles white on his weapon, every shadow a potential ambush. Dawn was a dirty gray smear through grime-caked windows when they stumbled into Sector Command's main lobby. Shattered glass littered the once polished marble floor. Reception desks lay overturned. Emergency lights cast long skeletal shadows. Stillness, absolute stillness. No rescue teams, no military cordon, no bodies, just wind whistling through broken panes. Where is everyone? Maloney whispered, her voice cracking. Sandra stared at the empty security post, the abandoned coffee cups. Her throat tightened. The silence screamed louder than any alarm. Michael pushed open the heavy main doors. The blast of cold morning air hit them like a physical blow, carrying the acrid tang of smoke and something else. Ozone, thick and unnatural. They staggered out onto the wide plaza fronting the Helios facility. The sight froze them mid-step. Irithyll was gone. Where the city's skyline should have clawed at the dawn sky, only jagged teeth remained. The shattered stumps of skyscrapers, silhouetted against a sickly greenish-yellow haze. Entire blocks were reduced to smoldering rubble. Fires still flickered in the distance, painting the unnatural fog with shifting, hellish light. The air tasted metallic, thick with ash and the pervasive, stomach-churning tang of ozone that clung to their clothes, their skin, their tongues. Silence pressed down, absolute and suffocating, broken only by the mournful groan of shifting wreckage carried on the wind. Maloney whimpered, pointing a trembling finger skyward. "What? What is that?" Her voice was a thin thread of terror. Above the ruined cityscape, where Earth's familiar moon should have hung, loomed an impossible sphere, vast, bruised purple and cratered with patterns that seemed to writhe if stared at too long. It dominated the sky. Its surface pulsed with a faint, sickly, internal light, casting long, distorted shadows that slithered across the devastation below. And hovering impossibly low on the horizon, dwarfing even the colossal wreckage of Irithyll, was a vessel. It wasn't sleek or metallic, but organic, jagged, like a shard of obsidian ripped from some alien mountain range. Its surface drank the light, radiating palpable menace. Sandra's breath hitched, her fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled for her phone. Signal, emergency broadcast, anything. The screen flickered weakly. No service, no signal. Tina watched her frantic swiping, her own face pale as ash. GPS. Comms. It's all gone, Tina whispered, her voice hollow. Nothing works. Michael tore his gaze from the monstrous ship. He scanned the alien horizon, jagged, unfamiliar peaks where the coastal mountains should have been. Structures in the distance that defied geometry. Obsidian pyramids spearing the poisoned sky, impossibly tall and sharp. Dear God, Michael breathed, the words thick with dawning horror. This isn't Earth. The accelerator, it didn't just breach containment. It tore a hole. We're somewhere else. Somewhen else. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the soles of their boots, rising from the shattered ground itself. It wasn't mechanical. It felt organic, pulsing like the heartbeat of the ruined world. Meloni whimpered, pressing her hands over her ears. "What is that?" she cried, her voice swallowed by the oppressive stillness. The hum intensified, vibrating the shards of glass beneath their feet. It seemed to emanate from the direction of the colossal ship hovering on the horizon, a sound that bypassed the ears and resonated deep within the bone. Then, cutting through the hum, came the voice. Deep, impossibly dark, rolling like thunder across the desolate plaza. It spoke syllables that grated against their minds, harsh consonants and guttural vowels forming words utterly alien, devoid of any recognizable pattern or meaning. It wasn't loud, yet it filled the space around them, pressing in like physical weight. Sandra gasped, clutching her head. Tina stumbled back, eyes wide with primal terror. Michael instinctively raised his pipe, scanning the rubble-choked skyline. Meloni froze, a statue of fear. They turned as one, drawn by the sheer, oppressive presence emanating from behind them. Towering over the shattered entrance archway stood a figure that defied comprehension. At least 8.5 feet tall, impossibly broad-shouldered, he was clad head to toe in a seamless vest of deep, non-reflective black that seemed to absorb the sickly light. A thick, braided beard, black as volcanic glass, flowed down his massive chest. His face was harsh planes and angles, weathered like ancient stone, dominated by eyes that held the depth and chill of interstellar voids. He stared down at them, his gaze a physical pressure, ancient and utterly devoid of pity or curiosity. Recognition slammed into Michael, a fragment from forbidden texts, whispered legends, Anunnaki, the Watchers, the gods who walked before men. Sandra's scream tore through the unnatural silence, raw and shattered. "Oh my God!" her voice cracked, rising into a hysterical shriek. "We're in a different time! Another dimension! What have I done?" Her hands clawed at her temples, eyes wide and unseeing, locked on the impossible sky, the colossal ship, the ruin that was Irithel. The weight of her ambition, her dismissal of warnings, the lives extinguished, it crashed down, crushing her icy certainty into dust. Frank's vanishing head, Tina's choked scream, the pulsing red eyes. They weren't accidents. They were her creation, her apocalypse. Michael stood rigid beside her, the jagged pipe slipping from his numb fingers to clatter on the rubble-strewn plaza. Meloni whimpered, a thin animal sound, shrinking back against Tina as if the assistant could shield her from the vast horror looming above. Tina remained eerily silent, her vacant eyes reflecting the bruised purple sphere dominating the alien sky. The Watcher's gaze, ancient and glacial, pinned them like insects. Doom wasn't a question, it was the air they breathed, thick with ozone and despair.